You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Shopify grows your business no matter how far or big you grow. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in.
This episode is brought to you by Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. In breaking news, leading scientists worldwide are conducting experiments to determine if Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are the perfect combination of peanut butter and chocolate. However, it appears the study was inconclusive, as the scientists couldn't help but eat all the Reese's. Because when you want something sweet, you can't do better than Reese's. Find Reese's now at a store near you.
Hello, good people. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This week, I am talking to another fellow podcaster, a podcaster who kind of does a similar thing that I do, but he has a very different background, a very different feel. He's just a different dude outside of the fact that we both love gear, we both love music, and we both love talking about it incessantly. He's also somebody I've actually recorded with several times on his show on Guitar Nerds. He's somebody I've talked to quite a bit on the interwebs, actually, and we get along famously. That man is Phillip Carter from the 40 Watt Podcast. 40 Watt Podcast is a similar interview conversation style format to this one, and Phillip is a great host. He's very, very good at it, and he's very, very passionate about all things guitar and music. Which is why on this episode, we barely talk about guitars at all. No, this is actually a more high-level conversation. I don't mean high-level in that, like, you gotta be some sort of brainiac to understand it, because obviously half of it's coming out of my mouth. But I mean high-level, and it takes a couple steps beyond just guitar, and we talk about creativity and music, and we get into some pretty heavy topics, actually, especially on Patreon. On Patreon, we got really, really, really heavy into some rather serious topics. So if you want to hear us kind of wax, I don't want to say enthusiastically because that's the wrong word, but it's definitely not poetic either. Either way, if you want to hear us talk about some rather heavy topics and you want to help support the show, please go over to patreon.com/tonemob, where for $5 a month, you can support the show and get access to the ad-free feed of this podcast. So check that out if you would like to hear Phillip and I get rather heavy. All right, that is long enough. Let's get into this episode with my dude, Phillip Carter from the 40 Watt Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have another podcaster who also occasionally talks about guitar stuff on the internet, Mr. Phillip Carter from the 40 Watt Podcast, whom I have podcasted with probably 5 times.
That sounds about right.
You know, between the Gear of the Year stuff for Guitar Nerds and your own show, and never on here, which is kind of unacceptable. So
yeah, no, you've been on my podcast. We've done the Guitar Nerds. I've been on Chasing Tone. I think once, maybe twice, and I'm forgetting it because my brain sucks and doesn't hold on to information.
Right.
It's Teflon coated. So, we just haven't done this before.
Yeah, it's good though, because we've got a vibe. We know how to riff off each other, but like legitimately, I know what kind of things you're into. I know like the area you live. I know a lot about you, but I actually don't know your whole story. Obviously, you played guitar for a long time. You've gotten into this very, very deep, as I have. But yeah, I think you come at it from a different angle. So I'd like to know what your actual story is and how you ended up in this weird world that we exist in.
Yeah. So actually, a lot of like just to talk about the podcast side of it first, and then we'll backtrack. I'll do a little bit of jumping around, which is exactly how my brain works. So it's fine. I actually took a lot of the ideas for my podcast from yours because of that whole. Instead of feeling like I was copying you, I was like, I approach this from a different way than Blake. I feel like there's more to say with this format that can be done. So I never felt like I was just completely ripping you off, even though I basically did.
I invented interviews. How dare you, sir?
You did.
Yeah.
Well, no, but you're you're kind of old school. You're OG in the whole interviews in the guitar space for podcasting. Interviews obviously used to happen all the time. But so my story, it's, I didn't grow up in a particular, this is going to be weird. I grew up in Clarksdale, Mississippi, which if you know anything about blues music, period, Clarksdale is a town that pops up over and over again. It was a big heyday town in the Mississippi Delta in the 1920s for blues and early rock and roll, just down the road from Memphis, Tennessee. W.C. Handy lived there for a while. Robert Johnson lived there for a while. Ike Turner, Sam Cooke, Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, they're all from my hometown. I did not grow up surrounded by music because it wasn't the vibe back then. The town took a little while to grow back into celebrating its musical roots and history.
Okay.
But when I was growing up, it was very much still dealing with some of the ramifications of, I won't say outright segregation, but just the cultural split more so than a civil split. And so those types of music weren't celebrated the way they should have been amongst the entire town.
What time frame are we talking about here? I think we're roughly in the same ballpark age-wise.
So I was born, I'll say, I don't mind saying how old I am. I was born in 1980, so I'm a teenager in the 1990s.
Okay.
And so it was just one of those things that wasn't really very talked about, and this is going to sound awful. So I took up guitar very late in life by most guitarist standards. I actually played sports most of my life. I was really into football and baseball, and I played basketball to stay in shape for football and baseball. I didn't care about basketball. I wasn't good at it. I was awful. But I grew up, a sports guy. My high school didn't even have a music there was no band. It was a tiny little school. And so eventually, through some friends, I got into running sound for youth group worship nights. And because technology, I understood. Technology, computers, that kind of stuff. I was really into audio engineering, that kind of. So I got into doing this. And through that, I started to get really interested in guitar. And so my friends started teaching me some guitar. I had a false start when I was 16 with an acoustic guitar. I'd only had it for a few weeks before I made my sister angry enough that she smashed it.
Oh no.
Yeah. Luckily it was just a pawn shop beater. I mean, my mom probably paid $50 for it, right? So I don't feel too bad about it. So I bought another guitar when I was 18 and started really learning with my friends and playing guitar and started helping lead worship in youth groups. And, just over time. And then I went to college. Initially didn't know what I was going to do in college. I bounced around a few majors. I went to this tiny school called Delta State University in the Mississippi Delta in Cleveland, Mississippi. And I bounced around a bunch of things, then decided I was going to go to MTSU in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I was going to study recording industry management and get into studio engineering. I felt like that was the thing to do. And it was during those couple of years that I had to move to Murfreesboro, Tennessee for people to tell me about my hometown's historical role in music.
Weird.
It was
so did you have any idea at all?
I had like the vaguest idea, to be honest, but I grew up in a household, like my first memory of music was piecing together the parts of the hi-fi stereo that was stashed in a closet because nobody was using it. And so I pieced it together and found Willie Nelson's Redheaded Stranger on vinyl and figured out how to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like my early days of music, listening to like legit country music. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. That's a deep rabbit hole where we decide what is real country music.
I have decided this already. So yeah.
and I knowing you, Blake, I know where you stand, because like my earliest, I had 8 tracks of Waylon Jennings and I had 8 track of Chris Christopherson and then of course the Willie records and some other things. And so I got into that, but it wasn't until I moved away I really understood my own hometown's role in music. So when I moved back to Clarksdale, I moved back with a new appreciation. And about that time, the town was also starting to go through a musical revitalization. And it was really starting to celebrate its blues roots. And there were new blues festivals popping up. I mean, there's literally feels like there's like 10 blues festivals in that town a year. And so I started discovering those things about music that I didn't know. And it was in this rediscovery of music. I'm still basically strumming an acoustic guitar, right? Still leading worship. That's what I did when I was at MTSU. And then one night while I was back home, I had fallen asleep on the couch with Mississippi Public Broadcasting, or PBS, on. And I woke up at like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I woke up to the TV still going because I'd fallen asleep on the couch, and I woke up to Stevie Ray Vaughan's second appearance on Austin City Limits.
Oh, geez.
Showing. And I sat completely and utterly transfixed. And though I would not call myself the typical disciple of Stevie Ray Vaughan, because while that got me started, that was like my gateway to the older world of like Albert King, Albert Collins, B.B. King, T-Bone Walker. But that episode completely changed. No. I want to play guitar. I wasn't happy just strumming guitar anymore. So that was like, I don't know, that's 2004. Sort of really changed my entire perspective on guitar.
Pretty late in life, really.
Yeah. Really, really late in life. But I really took the bulls by the horn a little bit. Bounced in and out of school. But basically from 2004 to about 2011, I made the majority of my living playing guitar at that point. I was in multiple bands all the time. I mean, it was a very meager living. I was barely making, rent and food kind of things. But every opportunity to play guitar, everyone who needed a sit-in guitarist, I can't tell you how many times I'd gotten a call like 45 minutes before a gig, said, "Hey, we need a fill-in guitar player." All right, I'll be there. One time in particular, I was playing for this blues guy by the name of, his nickname was Razorblade. He led a band called the Deep Cuts. And I loved it. Everybody had knife names. His real name was Joshua Stewart. He's a Vietnam vet. He called me and said, "Hey, our guitar player, and Dr. Mike, who taught me so much about playing guitar, he couldn't make it for whatever reason." And I said, "Sure." I grabbed a guitar, grabbed an amp, made my way to the club that was in town, so no big deal. And then I get there, and they're setting up recording gear. I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" "Oh, yeah, we're recording tonight for a live album, by the way."
"Oh, thanks."
"You're doing what?" So, yeah, it was those kinds of things. Like, it was very seat of my pants. So even to this day, I'm very much an improvisational player, because I had to grow up in just make it work. You're not going to know these songs, and that's okay. And so did that for a while, and eventually I went back to school. During that time, I also started running front of house sound at Ground Zero Blues Club in Clarksdale, Mississippi, which is famously known as Morgan Freeman's Blues Club in Clarksdale. I was also bartending at the higher end restaurant that he co-owned in town. And then eventually I was assistant manager at the Blues Club. And I decided that food service wasn't what I wanted to do for a living. And so I quit those, and I went back to school full time at the ripe old age of 26. And so I'm gigging and I'm going back to school. I decided I'm going to make a go at a music degree. And I did. I had to do, I did an interdisciplinary degree in music and audio engineering, which, to be honest, my first time engineering a band in the studio, I swore I'd never do it again. The technology and the sound wasn't the problem. Personalities can be an entire situation.
It can be the most wonderful experience in the world or the most horrendous experience in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
And usually it's just a kind of a blend of both. But I love the studio. But you get some studio disagreements are so much worse than like regular disagreements. It's almost like the worst kind of disagreement. I'm being a little bit facetious, but
Oh, well, you're not, though, because it can be really personal. Because in the same way that it's really hard for songwriters to put themselves out there and to spill their heart out in their music, it's a difficult conversation sometimes to have with studio musicians when you have to tell them, hey, you're dragging, or hey, that isn't working. That thing you're doing that you are feeling, it really kind of, you can chip away at people's ego a little bit, and some people that nerve's a little closer to the surface than others, and it can be really, really hard. And I was recording Friends, and I'm like, I want y'all to stay friends, so we're gonna not do this anymore.
Mhm.
Like I'd rather be your friend than your engineer. So I did that, got the degree, then graduated, and then student debt came calling, and so I had to start paying loans. So I started putting in applications for jobs everywhere I could, because the gigs I was playing, sure, they were paying rent, but they weren't paying much above that, to be really, really honest. So I ended up finding a part-time job in a public library. Loved it. Then I applied for a full-time job at the same time that I applied to study musicology. I wanted to get a master's degree in musicology, followed up with a PhD in ethnomusicology under David Evans at the University of Memphis, who is the guy. He is retired now. He's professor emeritus, so there's no chance of me studying under him at this point. But so I went and interviewed at the university, but about that same time I got offered the full-time job in a library, and I was like, more school, insurance, more school,
more debt.
retirement. Yeah, exactly. More debt. I was like, I'm going to go to work.
Mhm.
And so I've been in libraries ever since. I've been working in libraries since 2011. I'm a public library director here in Mississippi of a city-county system, and I love my work. But, it cut into the gigging. The gigging died down. I didn't get to play as much as I wanted to. I still played guitar at home. And around 2019, I had made a decision I was going to start a podcast called Mississippi Made. And I was going to travel Mississippi and interview all of these Mississippi musicians and people who make music about Mississippi. And I wanted to talk about Mississippi music. And I bought all this equipment, I was going to do it, and then 2020 happened. And so that never happened. I'm not exactly going to be traveling to interview, 90-year-old blues guys in the middle of a global pandemic.
Oh,
that's
yeah. Why not? I don't understand. Yeah.
It sounds like a great idea.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
So, 2020 was real hard. We won't go way into that, but losses in the family, just the depression that came with being cooped up and kind of limited on what we can do. By then, gigging had completely stopped for me, so I lost that outlet. And in an offer, in an attempt to regain some of that connection to at least the musical community, I decided I would start podcasting. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to do it the traveling way, so let's call it something else. Let's do something else. And I started 40 Watt Podcast, and the first 4 episodes were just me talking into a microphone about music gear, musical instrument industry. And then I had my first guest on the podcast, which was Clifton Worley from the Clifton Worley Show. The now long gone, unfortunately. I don't think Clifton's coming back to us.
But I want him to come back. I always enjoyed Clifton.
Or at least just to hang out. Come on.
Just come hang. Just come hang, Clifton.
Yeah. I love Clifton. He's another fellow Mississippian. So I had him on the show, and then immediately after we finished recording, I was like, no, this is what I want to do. I want to record conversations with other people and just talk and just have a good time. No like gotcha interviews. No like, I don't even want to go like deep hitting controversial topics, because there's enough of that in our daily life. I just wanted to talk about this thing that I loved, and been doing it now for over 4 years.
Mm-hmm. And you found your way into other guitar media spaces. You actually came to NAMM, which, that was cool. That was cool.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing to start doing. And now I've been doing it so long and it's so normalized in my brain that I forget how weird it is sometimes.
Oh, it's totally strange. And you do it full time. So this is like your full-time gig. And so it's got to be even weirder when you explain that your full-time job is this. I get to say it as a hobby. I make tens of dollars a year of podcasting. It's great.
Dozens of dollars.
Literal every dozens. Now and again, I can buy some new strings.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting thing. But my favorite thing, the reason I do it, and honestly, the thing that keeps me doing it, is meeting people, hearing stories, having conversations. I love everything about almost everything about the people in this industry. I really do. And there's so many just wonderful, warm, heartfelt people I've gotten to chat and meet and who become friends. And it's such a small, tighter knit community than it seems at first. For example, I went to NAMM in 21. I'd been doing the podcast for less than 6 months. And I ended up...
What NAMM did you go to?
21, the one in Nashville, the last one in Nashville.
Oh, the one where there was like a ghost town.
It was a ghost town, but actually that was great for me because I got to know Clifton recommended me to a bunch of other folks. So I ended up in an Airbnb chilling with Ryan from 60 Cycle Hum and the boys from the Effects Loop, and I got to hang out with a bunch of other folks that I'm not going to try to remember everybody. There was a lot of people in that house, y'all. We had to cut costs. We were doing it on the cheap. But had a great time, got to know a bunch of people. So it was kind of great that the NAMM wasn't like super packed and busy because it gave us a lot more time to just kind of hang out, to meet and actually talk to the people that were there. I think I went and sat with Mike Trombley from Native Audio at his booth and talked uninterrupted for 40 minutes on the NAMM floor.
Wow.
Just nuts.
I remember that one. I didn't go to it, but I remember Rhett Scholl called me from there and was like, hey, I took the time to come to NAMM to do content. There's nothing here, dude. I was like, well, I'm sorry. At least you're, in Atlanta or Atlanta-ish. It's not too far. He's like, can I please come to the String Joy shop and film? I need something out of this trip. I was like, go for it, buddy. So it actually kind of worked out really well because he came and did a video that I've referred hundreds of people to because they're like, do you really make your strings in Nashville? I'm like, well, here's a video. Go.
I've seen that video. I didn't realize it was made during that time. Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great community. I've really enjoyed being part of it. It's sort of filled a little bit of that gigging void in my life because I still don't gig very much. I went from doing in the mid to late 2000s into like 2010 to 2011. I went from doing 150 to 200 gigs a year to doing less than 30.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm probably doing, I don't know, maybe 20 gigs a year is what I'm doing. And it still hurts. It still sucks to not be playing, but being able to have conversations and talk to people. But it's also resulted in me buying way too much gear.
Well, yeah, that is an unfortunate / fortunate byproduct of this whole thing. It's like, it gets really ridiculous, really, really fast. Like,
really fast.
Really fast. I think I've said this on the podcast a million times. And part of me is glad for having these feelings because it does push me to record more and do more musical projects. I do a lot of just like, I don't want to say behind the scenes, but like things that somebody's like, I need a song for this. I'm like, yeah, let me just do that real quick. Like, oh, it needs to be this vibe. Like, it's not like just world class, Hollywood budget studio soundtrack type of things, but it's like, oh yeah, I need a little jingle for this thing. I'm like, let me just do that for you. Because I like, listen, keep me fresh, type of thing.
Anytime you feel that way about even the littlest bit of music you create, just remember that someone got rich off of Subway, Eat Fresh.
That's
Come
true.
on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Or ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Yeah, exactly. Man,
that was a rapper.
And
who was
sync
that?
Music.
That was a famous rapper. I forgot who that was.
Oh, no, I'm not going to look it up. I will not Google on this podcast right now.
Either I can't remember who it was. It's somebody that we've heard of, but it's somebody that came up with that. I don't remember who it is off the top of my head. But yeah, no, it's just I do a lot more than maybe it seems like I do. I don't put everything out. I have hard drives full of nonsense. But what it did, that feeling was I got all this cool stuff. Like my teenage self could never have fathomed that I would have immediate access to this level of gear at all. And so I started feeling kind of guilty because I wasn't doing anything besides demos and made it all about the gear, which I still love the gear, but I needed to just make music. What would you do if you were as good of a guitar player as you are now, which is, admittedly pretty mediocre, but I was even worse as a teenager. If you had the skills, you had the knowledge, and you have the access to the gear and the space, why aren't you just making whatever you want? So I did. And
because what's holding you back from it?
Nothing.
And I want to come back to that for just a second, though, when you're talking about, as good as I am, which is mediocre. We as guitarists, Joe from Pedal Playhouse, Joan of Heart, posted on Threads today. I saw it a little bit ago. Talking because she was responding to someone else, Jordan.wav, however you want to say it. Talking about, I think he had said something about not being a good guitar player, and she commented and said, "Yeah,
Jordan?
I know.
Okay,
I know."
All right.
So, but she commented and said, "Is there a script you all you good guitar players read where you must not acknowledge that you're any good at this instrument?" And no, and I responded, "No, it's a trauma response, because we have been told by the internet that basically if you're not Eddie Van Halen, you're not a good guitarist, and there's no reason anyone should listen to you play or you do anything." And I really want that mentality to go away very, very badly, because I had this whole run where I had to tell people, listen, do you know what you call someone who is touring in the most amazing technical instrumental band in the world who plays guitar in that band? You call them a guitarist. Do you know what you call someone who's been playing guitar for 2 weeks and can play like one song halfway through 3 chords? A guitarist.
True.
There's just, you're playing the instrument. Play it however you want to. And so I really want us to, and this is me preaching at myself, gotta stop talking down about our own playing. Yes, we all want to be better than we are. If you don't want to be a better guitar player than you are right now, please go find another hobby, because you've maxed out here. There's nothing else here for you. But the rest of us, we always want to be better. We've got to be better about not treating ourselves like we're not musicians just because we're not insert XYZ guitarist here.
It's true, because I'll talk about myself like that all day long, with no questions, no reservations. But I will never talk about that about somebody else. Yeah. I would when I was a kid, when I was stupid, didn't know any better. But now, are you playing guitar? And especially I've heard people who have a paid gig of some sort where somebody's giving them paying them money to play a guitar as a service or record something. Guess what, buddy? Did you just make $10? You're a professional musician, because you just got paid to do something that most people will never get paid to do, ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
The majority of the gigs I do now are I'm playing guitar for high school show choirs. I'm playing guitar for musicals, pit bands, those kinds of things. When I do get the gigs, weddings, I play. My favorite weddings are the ones. I had a friend of mine who said, "Hey, can you still play at my wedding? Or are you still willing to play at my wedding?" I said, "Yeah, just tell me when it is." "It's Monday." "Okay. What do you want?" She said, "I don't care. Just play." So I improvised for an hour in a wedding service. It was great. I loved it. But I'm playing show choir pop tunes, and people are paying me to do that. That's a real service. Working guitarist. There's no shame in that. We've got to quit acting like, unless you are, I don't know. I use Eddie Van Halen as a barometer often, but insert favorite amazing guitar player here. We've got to treat ourselves a little better, and I think we'll all be a little happier for it.
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Maris Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Maris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4,800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations in 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my talkie?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services, and it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there. We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby because, let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff. Well, and I think it's a good message to keep repeating. I talk about it all the time. It was just on an episode I did with Mike Cole that just dropped this week. He said on that episode, if you had asked teenage him about where he is now, keep in mind, he's got 280,000 YouTube subscribers or something. I can't even remember. A lot. And it's happened very quickly. If he was, and he's getting ready to purchase a home and talking all this stuff off the back of his obsession with guitar. But he said, if I was to show teenage me myself now, I would think I was a failure because I was picturing I'm flying on jets, it's me and John Mayer in the same sentence. That's what the success looked like to young him. And that's what he thought he was going to be. And it became apparent after years of trying to do that wasn't going to be the path. That wasn't going to happen. And I think a lot of us when we're younger have even if we're not willing to put it into words the way he did, kind of a similar viewpoint of what quote unquote success as a musician looks like. And it looks like the Rolling Stones. It looks like the biggest bands of all time, Nirvana, whatever. When in reality, that's 0.1% of anybody who's ever even looked at the instrument. It's so small.
There are an awful lot of amazing, wonderful musicians, even, and y'all, I'm talking about before even today, where it's even harder to make a living as a musician. I'm talking when you could still make money off album sales kind of things. There are an awful lot of amazing, small, regional touring bands who made just enough to make their mortgage and just enough to keep their bills and food on their table, who were amazing musicians and working very, very hard. That is success as a musician. The houses and tours and cars, and listen, I've never done the tour thing. I've never been on tour, quote unquote. I've done some weekend runs and I've done some week-long runs, but never what I would call a tour. Those were enough for me to know I am not built for tour.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'm not that person. I want to sleep in my own bed at least every other night if I can. Success comes in a lot of different shapes. And I think part of me seeing it the way I did, and yeah, it would have been nice to be in like a big band. I would have loved
Sure.
that.
Mhm.
But it was also never like a real goal of mine, because I think because I came to guitar so much later, and like my musical influences were professors in college who were professional musicians. They teach music, they perform music. This is their life in music. And so I saw very early on in my musical journey an alternative to the you've made it, you have a platinum record, and you're on tour 300 days a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's something I mean, I can't bemoan the path too much, but I wish I would have thought about, because it logically makes sense. There's a ton of ways to get into the music industry if it's what you're really passionate about. Now, that said, if you're not that passionate about it, you shouldn't do it. Like,
Yeah.
it's not the most straightforward path. But if it's what you can't stop thinking about and it's what you are obsessing over at all times, which I was, and still do, then you should look for a path that makes sense for your goals. If I would have realized that I could do something like this, of course it didn't exist when I was a kid, but like,
Yeah.
became more apparent as it went on. I would have been like, well, yeah, I could totally do that. That's
Mhm.
I mean, it's hard. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's for everybody, but there was something I could see once I realized it was an option. Maybe that for you is like managing a studio. Maybe that is, I mean, there's a million different ways to go about it. Like I made a short video about it last year. There's so many things. And I think that's applicable to any industry that you really are interested in.
Mhm.
Maybe you really like painting. I mean, maybe you want to make a better paintbrush. I don't know. There's all kinds of different ways to look at it.
For me, I look at it this way, and I have this conversation with people all the time. I say all the time, not as much as I used to when I was, around more people. Now I feel so compartmentalized in my life. But there was a phrase I used to love writing. I loved writing. I wrote at one point I was both a journalism or an English major for multiple semesters, wrote for newspapers, wrote for websites. I loved writing. But I didn't really do it that often outside of if I had a reason. Oh, I've got to write this article. Oh, I've got to write this thing. And writing came fairly natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't just write for fun. It wasn't a thing I did. And so for a little while, I thought I wanted to be a writer. And then someone who is a writer, that's what they do for a living, they just simply looked at me and said, well, writers write.
No.
And they were being very frank and very honest with me, but they were right. Writers write, whether that is for the job, whether that's for fun, whatever it is, writers write. And I look at the same way for musicians, guitarists, whatever you pick your instrument or pick your passion. I talk to an awful lot of guitar players who tell me, oh, well, I haven't picked up a guitar in 2 weeks. Why? My first 7 or 8 years of playing guitar, I didn't go a day without playing guitar because I couldn't fathom not playing guitar for a day. In fact, I think the longest I've ever gone not playing a guitar, period, is 5 days. That's the longest I've ever gone without picking up a guitar. Even when I'm on trips, I'll hunt down music stores, not because I'm looking to buy something, but because I need to find a guitar to play because I want to play guitar. And if that isn't you, if you just don't want to, if you don't have that constant want to play guitar, that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't be a guitarist. But maybe that's not where your passion lies the strongest.
Right.
Find the thing that you can't seem to go a day without doing, whether you're paid for it or not, and focus there. There's something there for you.
I think that's a really good message. almost all of us, I've met only a handful of people in my whole life where you're like, so what are you into? And they're like, I don't know. There's not that you run into them. It exists.
Yeah.
But it's
I
not very
I go to
common.
work and I come home. I go to work and I come home.
Yep.
That's
what do you do?
I
What do you do at home? Like, I drink some beer, go to bed. Like, do you really like beer? Not really. It's like,
no, they're just drinking Natty Light. Nothing, not even good beer.
I'm like, okay. And now those people legit, like, I don't mean to sound the way I'm gonna sound, but I can't help you because I have the problem of I get too into stuff. I get way too into things, and now I'm like, I'm talking about just now. Yeah. The examples are numerous, so I don't need to name them all. But I get way too into whatever it is. It's just my wiring, so I cannot relate to somebody who doesn't care about anything. It's not somebody I have anything in common with.
I meet some people who have lots of interests, and I have lots of interests. I do. I'm interested in a lot of things, but for me to deep dive on something that's really meaningful. So I've learned to really pay attention when something starts to just absorb every thought for me. It's like, oh, there's something here. You need to explore this. Because I have the typical ADHD, many like intro into habits, right? Like, oh, I want to get into photography. Everyone's done it. It's okay, y'all. It's okay. We can all embrace this demon. I want to get into photography. Guess what I don't do? Carry a camera around and take pictures all the time. I obviously didn't want to do it bad enough. Yes. Or I wanted to get into painting, or I wanted to get into name the hobby or pursuit. If I'm not really, really into it, within about 2 weeks, I move on. Because I know that the things that really grab me, I'll know. Music, audio engineering is one of those things that I got out of it for a long time because of those experiences right out of college, but I'm getting back into it and I really, really love it, even though I have lost any skill I may or may not have had in it. I'm getting better at it again. And those things the podcast has brought to me, and podcasting. There have been times where I was like, this is work. Scheduling interviews sucks. Trying to get in people's calendars sucks. Editing video sucks. But then the conversations. I think about all those wonderful conversations I have and getting to know people and getting to hear stories. And I'm like, okay, that's why I do it. There's other stuff I have to do. This is the part I can't stop thinking about. 100%. So I focus on that. Yeah.
Honestly, most of the other stuff around doing this isn't that fun.
No.
Like chasing people around, trying to get the schedule is like one of my least favorite things to do. But you don't get to have it both ways. Like,
no,
until you get to like upper echelons. I mean, upper echelons of the podcasting world. Do you not have to do that? And then even then, you're given a list. Like, I'm sure Rogan or whoever else has this problem. He's given a list of everyone on the planet, basically, and he's like, "Well, who do you want to talk to here?" And they're like, and he's like, then you got to pick people. You can't talk to everybody. So bringing it back down to, more normal levels, there's not that selection problem, but there's the scheduling and the like, oh no, I forgot. I got somebody penciled for, you're talking to 3 people at the same time. And they're like, hey, can we all do it on Wednesday? And you're like, no,
no, you really can't.
Yeah. I wish I could, but I can't.
And I've done some marathon days of podcasting too, like Gear of the Year style. Or I remember one week, Joe and I from Guitar Nerds should have never done this, but we recorded Guitar Nerds Patreon. Then we recorded an episode for 40 Watt and 40 Watt Patreon all in one day.
That sounds great.
And no, it was awful because the next week those episodes go live and people start commenting on social media or in Discord or in whatever. And I'm like, I don't remember which podcast we talked about this on. I don't have a clue.
That's very normal for me. I don't remember it. I cannot remember at this point. I've given up trying to remember. And when people are like, you said this, I'm like, did I? You're going to have to tell me what minute mark on what episode, because there's no way that I'm going to remember the context of what that was at this point between the two podcasts. And I don't know how many episodes at this point. I've lost count.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Too many hours of me blabbering. Too many.
I'm not going back and listening to all of your back catalog. I'm not one of those people, by the way. I love the people who go and listen to back catalogs and they're like, I'm going to listen to everything. And I see them I don't see them in particular, but I see them on my analytics. And I'm like, oh, somebody's going back and listening to everything. 'Cause you see like the spikes. And, but I'm not one of those people. I'm like, all right, I discovered you on November 1st, 2022. I've listened to everything since then. I'm not going backwards.
If I get really into something, I will. But I'll always start with the new stuff.
Yeah.
I'll start with the one, wherever I discover them, I will start there. And if I really, really like the show, when I run out of new stuff, because usually how I find things these days is people are like, oh, I loved this episode of this podcast, whatever podcast that might be. And so I'm like, okay, let me go to that episode. That sounds interesting. And I'm like, oh, I really like this show. Now, sometimes that episode is old.
Yeah, that's true.
But most of the time it's within the last 2 months. But so then I'll catch up to the thing. And then I'm like, well, if I really, really like the show, I'm like, well, now I'm going backwards. So it really depends for me. And also, if it's a show that's like, okay, these 3 episodes are about this topic. Okay, cool. I don't care if it's from 2016.
Yeah, I feel like that's the caveat. Like interview based, I'm probably not going to go back. But like something like Cocaine and Rhinestones or Disgraceland, I'm going to go back and listen to every episode.
Because it doesn't really matter, right? It's just information. So
it's good storytelling.
But even interview style shows, though, I mean, oftentimes they're talking about things that are happening in the moment or will be happening or whatever. But I don't know. I don't think I always go back to this one because it's one of the craziest ones for me. I think no matter what year it is, it's always interesting to hear Yvette Young talk about touching her sleep paralysis demon. I think that's a great story.
That was a wild episode. I'm pretty sure that episode was one of there have been multiple where your podcast has been the soundtrack to my late nights working at the library by myself.
You told me that. Yeah, by yourself.
I'm pretty sure that episode was, I can remember where I was standing in the library when she said that. I was like, I'm going to turn this off till I'm at home.
That's where the demon is. Don't wait till you're at home.
Oh, it was a wild time.
Yeah. So with interview shows, admittedly I'm biased, but like, especially ones like what we both do, where it's just like, let's see where this goes. You never know what could pop up. Yeah, maybe somebody's just promoting their record or whatever, and that's fine. Yeah. But you never know where the nuggets are going to come from.
No, I have had some episodes that, you go into it and you're talking to people from different companies or musicians, and I go into it basically they're going to sell themselves, right? Which is fine because that's also what this is. This is marketing for people. But then there will be episodes where I will have some of the deepest, most meaningful conversations I've ever had. One of my favorite episodes of the podcast ever was I had Ari from Hot Tone on the podcast. Ari handles like their artist relations and their outreach kind of stuff. And I got to see him at NAMM. It was great. We barely talked about the products. Instead, we talked about cultural perceptions of guitarists and guitarist role in society and culturally. And it was just, we had this really deep, meaningful conversation that I walked away from going, I'm still not sure I even know what all they make, but I had this like great connection and this really great conversation. And it just felt like I was a better person for having had the conversation. And those are the ones that when they happen, because you can't predict them, you don't know they're going to happen. Those are the ones that I'm like, that's going to fuel me for a few months.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the other side of it too, where, sometimes it's like, well, that was an episode, I am fortunate. I honestly can say this. I cannot remember the last time I had an episode where I was like, that was a bad episode. That was not good. That was not good. And sometimes I felt like, ooh, that was a little lukewarm, and I'll go back and listen to it. I'm like, oh no, it's actually pretty good. It was just wasn't quite as snappy as I am expecting, or something.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time since I've had one where it's like, that was rough. That was
Occasionally
hard.
you get someone who's just not a talker, which I always find it funny in podcasts when people say, I'm sorry, that was a long-winded episode. That's the point.
Yeah, please keep talking.
Please keep going.
Yeah.
Because I didn't plan questions for this. This is all conversation. This is just where we're gonna go. So yeah, keep telling stories, and that's it. It honestly is my favorite part. And just I don't know, that connection to all of this. I don't know where I was gonna go with that. My brain was running ahead of my mouth. So
It happens. Do you run into that though? Like I stopped preparing questions with very few exceptions because it was a waste of time. Because
total waste of time.
I'd prepare all this stuff and then we would get to zero of it, and I'm like, why am I wasting all this time? I stopped by like episode 6. I was like, done.
I stopped researching for episodes. I stopped like deep diving. I was like, I'm gonna be super hardcore. I'm gonna be like Sean from Hot Ones, where he's like knows like what they did in like junior high school. And I'm like, I'm gonna know everything about this guest so we can have this conversation. Never mattered.
No.
It not once mattered. And so I was like, stop. Just talk to people. Generally that yields so much better results than trying to be quote unquote professional about it.
I just felt like it was a waste of time because I didn't get to the questions half the time.
Yeah.
And I like not knowing a little bit. Like I want to know like what the deal is. It's not like I want to have somebody show up and be like, oh, what's the guitar? What am I doing here? Like, like I don't want it to be that bad, but I do want my questions to come from a place of curiosity where I actually want to know the answer to it. Not, I already know the answer to this.
Right.
I want to be asking them, what is this? Like, what is going on here? Why did you do this thing? And maybe they've heard that question a million times, or maybe because it's a genuine question, like, wow, no one's ever asked me that before.
I think also if you get too focused on questions, on preparing questions, you miss the opportunities. You miss the doors that open. You could. You probably didn't because you never got to your questions. But if you made all these questions, so you're hell bent on asking these questions, you're going to miss the door that opened to have a great conversation because you were too worried about making sure you got your questions.
Mm-hmm.
I like to throw all that out completely and just have open it. And I tell people when I start booking them, I'm like, this is a conversation based. There's not going to be any gotcha questions. I'm not out to, I'm not trying to do investigative journalism here. I've almost never edited for content on the podcast. Only once I said something really out of school, so I had to take it out. And also on another episode, somebody screwed up a punchline, and I edited that for the correct punchline for something big. It was problematic, the punchline they gave, just because they were trying to say something, trying to say this one particular thing, and they said something completely different. Like, oh no, don't put that out there, please. I was like, I can fix that, no problem. But I like the naturalness of just having the conversation. I think when you get too focused on making sure you're asking XYZ questions, you lose some of the natural conversation that can happen.
Yeah, and in my head when I'm talking to people, I'm listening actively, and I am thinking of responses like as it's coming, like, oh, they're talking about, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I really liked this guitar player, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan on Austin City Limit, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'll ask him something about that. Nope, we went past that now.
Yep.
That's kind of not relevant to bring up anymore. Now, and once in a while, there's a pause, and I'm like, you know what? I do actually want to go way back, like 5 minutes, and I will mention that. I know this is not exactly what we're talking about now, but I was super curious about this point. But a lot of times I'm like, nah, that one's over. The moment's passed for that question.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Good Hertz. It's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblitzaudio.com. I think you're gonna like what you find.
One Hit Thunder is a podcast where we both celebrate and have a good laugh about bands and artists that had just one hit that we all know. Each week, we're joined by a guest from the world of music or comedy to learn more than you ever thought you would about some songs that you can't forget. And we decide if they brought the One Hit Thunder or were nothing more than a one-hit blunder. Look, if you listen to the show, you're probably going to laugh, and I guarantee you're going to crush next time the bar has music trivia. Tag Team, Jane Child, Meredith Brooks, Looking Glass, Sean Mullins, Eiffel 65, EMF, Crash Test Dummies, Crazy Town, Chumbawamba. We have hundreds of episodes in our back catalog and a new episode each week, so pass the Dutchie, make sure you're connected, and subscribe to One Hit Thunder wherever you get your pods.
Hey everyone, this is Tuck from Fit for a King, an off-road minivan. Every week I bring you fun interviews alongside your favorite metalcore entertainers with my new podcast, Get Tucked. Join me every Monday with bands like Counterparts, Crystal Lake, like Moths to Flames, and many more. We play unsigned and undiscovered bands, deep dive into each artist's history, and of course provide the greatest breakdowns in current metalcore. Tune in to Get Tucked every Monday, out now through Sound Talent Media.
Well, I mean, if we want to talk about that second performance of Stevie Ray Vaughan on Austin City Limits, I'm happy to talk about it. That episode, there was magic in that episode. I've realized that I am not the only guitarist who references that very specific episode as being a turning point for them. I've listened to interviews where Derek Trucks has referenced that episode. I've listened to interviews where John Mayer very specifically referenced that episode. There's a bunch of other names that I didn't really remember because, let's be honest, I really love Derek Trucks and I like John Mayer. It's fine. We've had this discussion on Gear of the Year when talking about Silver Skies. But
I got to edit out that word on this podcast. Silver Skies. No.
I didn't say Strat. It's fine.
Oh, jeez. Oh,
Beep. Beep. The Fender Beep Caster. But no, that episode, he was sober. He had cleaned up. Recorded in 1989. Wow. Just, if you've never experienced that Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I know that Stevie Ray Vaughan is a cliche at this point. He's fallen out of popular favor. I get it. That's fine. I'm not telling you have to like him, but give it a listen. There's magic in that set. And it blew my mind. I'm still trying to capture the energy of that. And I'm a lifelong Austin City Limits watcher because of that episode too. I think some really magical performances have happened on that stage.
I am not from the same background as you for the most part. I come from very different things that like got me excited about music. But even I know about that episode and I remember where I was the first time I saw it. I was actually in Guitar Center. And
were you really?
Yeah, it was playing. And I was just there getting strings or some whatever. Just like I was just there to pick up some knickknack. And I was like, just transfixed. Like I was like, what is going on right now? What is happening? I was completely blown away. I stood there for like 15, 20 minutes. It was just like, oh wow, yeah, I forgot I was supposed to be doing something. And I went back and watched the whole thing later because I could not fathom what I was saying. And I knew who Stevie Ray Vaughan was at that point. I was like 16 or 17. I'd heard him before. Yeah, this is cool. Not my thing necessarily, but super cool. I totally get it. But seeing that moment, I was absolutely flabbergasted. And it was I don't know if it was as big of a turning point necessarily because I was already pretty into it at that point.
Yeah.
But it was one of those musical moments where you're just like, wow, there are levels to this game. And I don't mean necessarily in skill, but it's like in the ability to express, the ability to feel things in the moment. I was just like, because he's not the most technically insane thing I've ever seen in my life.
No.
Yeah, it's technical and it's good, and he is amazing. But this technicality isn't what makes him an amazing guitarist, in my opinion. It's the feeling.
And we love to throw terms around vibe, mojo, energy.
That's what that episode
that's
is.
What
though.
it is. That's what that episode is. And I had the exact same reaction the first time I ever went to see Derek Trucks live. A friend of mine and I went to see him at New Daisy in Memphis, Tennessee. Recoscante en Pace. It's no longer, that theater is no longer with us. But we go to this show. He's never listened to Derek Trucks, and I've only listened to some albums. Not like super in depth, but I knew I wanted to see him. We didn't talk until we were back in Mississippi. Like, we're leaving Memphis. It's like a 40-minute drive to get out of downtown Memphis, cross the state line, get down the hill into the Delta. And we didn't talk until then. And basically we looked at each other and he was like, you know how every time you see a great guitarist, you either want to quit or you want to go home and practice? Like, yep. He said, the way he plays is so different. He may as well have been playing flute. I have none of that. I just don't even understand the way he plays guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I was. It's like you sometimes you have those experiences where you hear something and you're like, the energy's right, the mojo's right, the playing's right, the tune's right. I live for those moments on stage too. It's one of those things. I wish I were a more technical player. I read music. I don't do it well. I can do Nashville number charts fine. I don't memorize songs well. Most of the songs I've ever played have been, hey, we're going to get all the main riffs and we're going to get the vibe and then we're going to make everything else up. It would drive people who are hardcore cover band people crazy because I refuse to be a hardcore cover band. But that's what I long for on stage. Those moments. I feel like you don't get those moments when you're so wrapped up in the verbatim of just reproducing this piece of music. Everything's written. It's fine. I do enough of those gigs with like show choirs and pit gigs where I'm just reproducing what's on the page. I live for those moments where that energy gets to get in and that vibe gets to get in and you get to interact with other people. And some people call it flow, or some people call it, in the moment, or the zone athletes call it. I want that. Mm-hmm. It's just like the podcast. I don't prepare questions ahead of time because I want to find that flow moment in this conversation where we're just talking. And sometimes that makes a great conversation that other people want to listen to, and that's fine. But sometimes it just means I get to have a great conversation. And musically, podcastingly, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, podcastingly. Yeah.
Yeah, podcastingly.
Well, we are approaching the end of the main episode here. And, as much as we've talked and as much as I think I have a pretty good handle on your responses to some of these classic questions, I do want to get into them regardless because it's an official Tone Mob episode now. So
yeah, exactly. We've got to talk about them.
Yeah, we've got to talk about it. But before I do that, now's your chance to take the floor, plug anything you want to plug, shout out anybody you want to shout out, say anything you want to say. You got a couple thousand people's ears right now, so go for it.
So the biggest thing I'll say here is, because I feel like I said a whole lot of the things I would say here on this episode about treating yourself better. There's a reason I sign every episode of the 40 Watt podcast by saying, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise. You should do those things. But that's not what I'm going to say here, even though I just did. Instead, my shout out's going to be, hey, y'all, your public libraries need you. Go to your public libraries. They're not the stuffy old book storage houses of your youth and memory. There's amazing things happening in public libraries all across the country, even around the world. Go there, check them out. They have, some of them have some of the coolest resources. The Chattanooga Public Library has a full recording studio in their library that's available for patrons to use. They even have they have a big sound stage. Now, you may not have that, but go to your public library. They've got ebooks. They've got, obviously physical books. You don't have to tell anybody libraries have books, but they need, public libraries need support more than ever today. So go visit your public library, go hang out, just figure out what's going on and find a place to get plugged in.
I like that. That's good. Yeah, our public library, we just recently started going back on a regular basis, actually, within the last
Good.
probably 2 to 3 years. And I mean, I lived at them as a kid, honestly. Like
me too.
I was there all the time. But as an adult, not so much. But we started going back more. And our local library is legit. Like I hadn't been in there for a long time. And I went in there and was like, this place is sick. They've got everything. They even have a library they call the Library of Stuff.
Yep.
Where it's like, I need a weed whacker. Oh, well, I can just borrow it from the library. Or I need a whatever. They've got random tools and random things that maybe you don't need to buy because you're going to use it once a year. A lot of them have these things. I didn't even know was a thing. So,
in
incredible.
A couple of libraries I've worked in, we've checked out everything from gardening tools to we do a seed library where if you're planting a garden and you need seeds for your library, come check them out at the public library. You can bring us back seeds when you harvest. That's great. That's fine. If you do, we don't really expect to get them back. Just come get seeds and go plant. There are libraries out there that have musical instrument lending libraries where you can check out a musical instrument from the public library. We're about to start in our public library. I've got a couple of musicians on staff. We're about to start going into nursing homes to work with patrons that have dementia to do musical therapy, to play songs from their youth for them so that they can have those musical aha moments where they can reconnect, because we found that music is really powerful in that. I am not a musical therapist professional, but I know I've heard and seen enough videos that make me cry on the internet about how music can reconnect people who are suffering from dementia back to, a time and of who they are. And it's really powerful stuff. And libraries are doing that all across the country. And so go visit your public library, even if you live in a small-ish town and maybe your library is still one of those that just checks out books. And you know what? You don't really need that service. They are fighting to justify their existence to growing numbers of people who don't think we need public libraries. And just you walking in the door counting as a statistic for a library visit helps them justify their existence. So just go in and use the bathroom if that's all you need to do. Go do that.
Plus, it's going to be hot. Most of these places have air conditioning. Just go in there and hang out and read a book for a while. It's not a big request.
It's not at all. Not a big one.
No. Well, that is probably a very worthy thing, and I agree. Libraries do need more love, so good plug there. And on the musical therapy side, there's a great episode on this podcast where a musical therapist takes you through a relaxation session. This is from a few years ago. Just go back and listen.
Oh, well, I may have to hunt that one down.
I'll
go back for you, Blake.
Go
I'll
back
and listen
to
past
good
episodes.
episode. I think you're going to like that one. That one's really good. Let's see. Are we ready? I think we're ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
We're going to go to the classic questions. Here we go. First one. What is your favorite Boss pedal?
Boss TW1.
Really?
The Touch Wah.
I didn't see that coming.
That is my favorite Boss pedal.
I don't know if that's ever been. Has that ever been? I don't think it has. I've only seen that pedal like once. What do you like about it?
I love auto wah. I love wah pedal in general. I know that it's sort of out of vogue right now, but I don't care. I will always have a wah pedal every gig. I usually don't put it on my board. It's off board. But I also really just love envelope filters. And the Touch Wah is, I don't know. It tracks well enough. It sounds good. I think it was the first auto wah I ever played, and so maybe that's part of why it still sticks in my head. The AW2, whatever was the one that came after it, the more common one, sounds great too. And honestly, I could bounce back and forth and say either one is my favorite, but if I'm going to pick one, let's pick the hard to get one. So we're going to go with the TW1 because I just love that effect. There's a lot of great Boss pedals, as evidenced by the sheer number of people who have said all their favorite Boss pedals on this show. But I think the TW1 needs a lot more love.
All right, TW1. I think that's a podcast first. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that it is. So
yeah, somebody knows if it is.
Somebody will correct us on that. Final question. What is your favorite kind of pizza?
Pizza.
Yeah.
I just love pizza. I just genuinely do. I have ribbed you enough for your dislike of pineapple on pizza.
It's foul. Foul.
I just so disagree, but that's okay. There is enough pizza to go around for everybody. But over the years, it's changed a bunch. I've been lucky enough to have like all of the styles of pizza that I can think of anyway. I've been to Chicago. I've done the deep dish. I've done the pub style. I've done the New York slice. I've done the Detroit pizza. I've done SoCal pizza. I'm going to just refrain there. I've done a lot of pizza, but I think my favorite is just a good old-fashioned Neapolitan pizza.
Sometimes, man.
Just tomato, cheese, great crust. There's some friends of mine in Cleveland, Mississippi that have opened a place. She went over to Naples and studied Neapolitan pizza. Chefery. I don't know what the word is, but we're going to go with that. The culinary art of Neapolitan pizza. And then she came back and they opened a restaurant called Lania. My friends are Marisol and Rory. And so they're making Neapolitan pizza in tiny Cleveland, Mississippi that is out of this world good.
Nice.
And I love every time I get to go over there. It's a long way from where I live now, so it's a real treat when I get to be back in that area and go eat there. Have to get there early because they're very much one of those, this is how much we're making tonight. When we sell out, we sell out. And that's just it. But it is incredibly good. And I have had to stare down some knuckle dragging Neanderthals who are like, you ever thought about doing a sauce more like Domino's? Well, no, sir, we have not. No, we have not.
Just go to Domino's.
Go to Domino's. Right.
But guess what? There's already a sauce like Domino's, and they're open till 2 a.m. or whatever it is.
Right.
Go for
Get
it.
that if that's what you want. This is an art. They don't say that. I say that.
I say that.
It isn't true, like classic Neapolitan pizza is an art form.
You know what I thought you were gonna say though? Not the Domino sauce. I thought you were gonna say, "Well, hey, this pizza's burnt." It's
yeah, there's probably some of that
too. Because I've taken friends to one of my favorite spots, and they're dear friends. They just have different opinions than I do.
Everyone has flaws.
And they were like, this pizza's burnt. I'm like, get out of this restaurant. I will eat it. Stop it. Yes, it's supposed to have a little char in it. It just went next to a wood fire inside the... What do you think? It's supposed to be like that. That's
char is where the flavor is.
It doesn't need to be completely burnt, and I have seen some that are too burnt, but it is rare. Sure. Just a little bit of char. It's nice. It's like complaining about the bark on a perfectly prepared Texas brisket. It's like, oh, it's got some crust on the outside. Like, oh, shut up. Knock it off. What are you doing?
You probably want ketchup too on your brisket, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you need ketchup.
You sweet summer child.
We get you some Heinz 57 for that.
Yeah, so I that's the kind of thing I like. I like something that takes. It isn't just about the taste for me, and we not even talked about guitars, but I feel this way about like musical instruments. I like things that take some skill and execution, and they're not refined for the sake of being snooty, but refined because of the passion in it to get something right. And be wanting, and something that isn't so easy. I've had pizza places that people have lauded, and I'm like, I could have got a frozen pizza from Walmart that was as good as this one,
right?
And I like that. And then I do share your opinion on Chicago deep dish. It's fine if you want that. It's a noodle away from lasagna,
which is good. It tastes good. Yeah,
it is good. But like, I'm gonna piss people off, but that's okay. I don't see the skill in deep dish pizza. It's a casserole.
It's a big casserole.
I see the skill in getting Neapolitan right.
Right.
I see the skill in getting a great New York slice right. I see the skill in getting Chicago pub style pizza right. Those kinds of things. So that's I love seeing passion in things, and to get that blend of cheese and tomato, right? Because it's not sauce. There's not a sauce on a Neapolitan pizza. It's tomatoes.
Right.
Crushed to be on that pizza. That's hard. It's very hard.
Yeah.
You don't do it right and it feels empty, or it's too acidic, or it's just... Anyway, I'm going to digress here.
I love it.
Getting hungry.
I am too, actually. All right. I'll get it together. Plus, we got to do Patreon. So
that's true.
We got to slide over and figure out what other kind of nonsense we can get into over there.
I thought that's where we talked about the aliens.
It is where we talk about the aliens.
Isn't that where we talk about the aliens? Okay.
That's where we talk about the aliens. Yep. Well, you ready to do that?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's head over.
All right, everybody. For Phillip, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. Alrighty, folks, there you have it. There's another episode in the can. Thank you so much for listening. I thank you from the bottom of my weird little heart. I thank you for taking the time to get through this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, you're really going to like Patreon. Patreon actually gets pretty intense at some points. We talk about some very serious issues that are close to home. And while we're not any closer to figuring them out, I think the discussion itself is very worthwhile. So if you'd like to hear that, please go over to Patreon, where for $5 a month, you'll get access to all of the back episodes, and you help keep this weird little thing going. You also need to check out 40 Watt Podcast. If you have not done that, he has talked to a lot of the same guests that I have. He's talked to me, and if you want to hear his perspective, I think you should definitely check out 40 Watt Podcast. Phillip's a great guy. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. Thank you to everybody who is supporting all this tone mobbery. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. I don't know what else to say. I've actually run out of words for once. Yeah, they'll come back. Talk to you very soon on the internet. Wait, I just yoded that. What in the world? One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.
Bowie, Dylan, Marley. You've heard the names and maybe you've heard their songs, but what about the stories behind the records that made titans of music like these so universally loved and important? Join me, Josh Adam Myers, host of The 500, as each week I go through a different album from Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Albums list from 2012 with an incredible lineup of comedians, actors, and musicians talking about how the music has impacted their lives. New episodes of The 500 come out every Wednesday. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the story of Whitney Houston.
This is the story of Kurt Cobain.
Of George Michael, of Otis Redding, of Amy Winehouse, of Michael Hutchence, Bob Marley. This is the story of Prince.
It's a new podcast series
about how they died, why they died, and why we're still talking about them so long after.
It's like nothing you've ever heard before.
It's storytelling.
But it's more than that, because rock stars,
they tell us how we feel. They change our mood.
They change the clothes we wear, the people we hang out with,
the way we remember things.
It's them who give us those ludicrous moments, the ones where you're
jumping around, singing your heart out, feeling understood.
And it's those moments we'll help you remember, the ones you're thinking about right now.
That feeling.
It's
coming soon from Crowd Network.
Just search for Death of a Rock Star on your podcast app.
And subscribe now.